And the beginnings of any project look probably more like an art project. Undefinable, misunderstood, nobody gets it, this isn't gonna work. It's very weird for a dude who sits behind a computer all day, usually like this, to think about the fact that I'm sharing a stage with Al Jorgensen. Pitch an idea to a public and allow the public to vote, right? Not let the gatekeepers vote and keep us out. Where the rules that we're living under, they were meant to be broken. Like, let's mess with them. Let's re-architect them. Everybody. So I just got to say two things. In 2 weeks, there's a band called Ministry. Anybody know the band Ministry? Cool. Al Jorgensen and company are playing here. It's very weird for a dude who sits behind a computer all day, usually like this, to think about the fact that I'm sharing a stage with Al Jorgensen. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the influence of music on my life in a minute. So. My name is Charles Adler, co-founder of Kickstarter. I'm working on a new project called Lost Arts, which will kind of tell a little bit of a story, what I would say is of humility, perhaps. But first I want to start out with a bit of a projection and maybe an ask and a hope that I have around the future that we all get to play in, right? That is empowered by technology, but certainly not the result of technology. So this future that I'm really excited about is one that enables all of us to pursue the dream that we have, whether that is starting a business or doing an art practice, developing a sculpture or producing a film. I think there's particularly in the past, far too many stories of people leaving ideas on the cutting room floor and not giving themselves, right? I think this is a sort of soul-searching comment, giving themselves the opportunity to pursue a dream. Right? An innocent dream that might end up being having a big impact in the world. And so it looks something like this, like innocent projects, pieces of furniture that you're working on personally so you have something to sit on at your desk, or things that might look weird to the mainstream world that might be skewed as technology or might be skewed as art, but it's sort of playing in the muddy territory between those things. So that's this future that I hope for all of us, which is one that is far more creatively empowering. But in order to kind of talk a little bit about that future, I think it's important to go and look back at the past. And so the past I want to talk a little bit about is maybe arrogantly and egotistically is me. So this is me. I don't even know what year. I'm old. But that's me on the left. That's my sister on the right. I'm the older one. And I started out in life as a pretty normal kid, probably just like any one of us, but as time went on, I started realizing that my personal interests skewed from the rest of my classmates. And so what that means, what that kind of gets articulated into is kind of actually going back to Ministry and Al Jorgensen, is an interest in what I would say is like the fringe of society, right? And so this is best exemplified in my interest in counterculture, like industrial music, hip-hop, punk rock scene, skateboarding, graffiti, and breakdancing, right? So imagine that time in the sort of 70s and 80s, and my interests were sort of leaning in that way. And as you start digging into those subcultures and kind of the ideals of those subcultures, and what I would say is the struggle and the fight of those subcultures, right, to just create, there's this mantra, right, this kind of anti-establishment mantra where the rules that we're living under, they're meant to be broken. Like, let's mess with them. Let's re-architect them. And so that was a big spirit in my life, and arguably in the sort of construct for the three of us, Perry, Yancey, and myself, who founded Kickstarter, we shared that commonality. We shared this sort of like anti-establishment motive of empowering those of us around us in sort of antagonism towards what was arguably a society or an industry that was holding people and their opportunities down. So I'll explain that a little bit more. The things that we were sort of fighting against were the industrialization of everything. And what I mean by everything, not only like the factories and the objects that we carry in our pockets or the objects that we drive in, but also the work environment that we were working in, right? Arguably, there's so many of the jobs that we hold that, quite frankly, are not all that humane, right? And maybe even a bit more comically, we start to see this industrialization of creative practice or creative industry, right? And for the three of us, and for me specifically, we were sort of disillusioned by the fact that there's all this amazing creativity, all these amazing ideas around us, both our friends and people that we were seeing now across the globe, that they just weren't getting the attention that they deserved. So I'll paint a little picture of what I mean by this. I'll pick on the film industry if I could. And I love film, I love the creativity of story and the industry that allows those things to get into our eyeballs and our brains, but it's got some issues. So I'll tell the story of a compare and contrast that gets into these results that we thought were, quite frankly, quite bleak and boring. So if anybody can remember the 1990s, in the 1990s there was a film with Bruce Willis called Die Hard. Anybody watch Die Hard? Yeah, pretty rad movie, right? Cool. Exhilarating. About 20 or so years later, there's another film series that effectively gives somewhat of the same storyline. Maybe it's a little bit more awesome, a little bit more modern. Anybody want to venture what that film was? The Bourne Identity, right? So it's a simple little example to get you to understand what I would say is like this repeat, this hit kind of mechanism, and what the result of that is it left all these other projects on the wayside, all these other films and stories along the wayside, and frankly, the world is kind of breaking down. We see that significantly, and those industries are falling apart, arguably, thankfully. But that was all of the motivation behind Kickstarter, right? And when we got together, it was this kind of mantra between the three of us, which was we were trying to empower all of us, right, individuals, to effectively pitch an idea to a public and allow the public to vote, right? Not let the gatekeepers vote and keep us out, right? So in a room full of entrepreneurs, creative people, and as one, I suppose, myself, I think it's always important to tell maybe the human story of the beginning, so those humble beginnings when you've just put something out there, you've put a piece of yourself out there, you've launched your product, and you're in this moment where, oh my God, I hope somebody else believes in what I believe in, sees and believes in that future, and we become a mechanism for that future for them. So I think there's no better place to start than literally the very first project that got funded on Kickstarter. So we launched April 28th of 2009, and so let's say this is April-May period of 2009. This is a project by a guy or a person named Dark Pony. So pseudonymity on the internet, super awesome. I don't know what this person is, but the project was quite simple, right? Dark Pony wanted to raise $15 just to complete a drawing and share that drawing with a few people. For $5 you can get a drawing. And the construct was just simple. This person would never finish, and they felt that the social dynamics or the social pressures of cash exchange would get them to complete the drawing. In sort of typical Kickstarter, what would be Kickstarter lore, Dark Pony blew the doors off of their project, raised $35, right? So the original was 15, yeah, super awesome. Are you Dark Pony? No? Okay. I've been searching for Dark Pony for like a decade. I don't know who this person is. Cool. And the story continues from there. This is something that I personally find fascinating, is the story of Alison Weiss. So Alison, you can kind of tell, she's a singer-songwriter, but she had at the time, and this is like the summer of 2009, she had another part of her life. She was a graphic design student in Athens, Georgia. And I have to paint a little bit of a picture. If you kind of build off of $35 from Dark Pony, again, like humble beginnings, innocent moment for us. We were seeing projects raise over the course of 30 days, like $1,500, right? And so Alison came onto the platform on a Thursday morning and had a goal of $2,000. That was crazy for us. Like when I say people were raising $1,500, they were hoping for $800 and they were crazy and got $1,500. So she wanted to raise $2,000. We're like, who is this person? She's crazy. And it got crazier from there. Again, like she launched in the morning, and by that evening, say 12 or so hours later, she had completely raised her $2,000 goal. But she had 30 days left. And so this is a story I would also say of how do we learn from those that use the things that we put out into the world. And so the things that we learned from Alison, she started realizing that, well, man, I've got 29 days to go. And for those of you who understand the mechanics of Kickstarter, you actually can't turn it off. Right? So once you set your duration, it's kind of going until that clock strikes zero. And so she started playing with and engaging with the audience. So the concept of stretch goals was effectively invented by Alison Weiss. And one little example of that is this sort of playful engagement with the audience and bridging what I would say is the artist and the audience divide. She had this stretch goal where if whoever put her over the $6,000 mark, she would get on Skype, right, and have a phone call. She did something that was even more rad, right, which was she recorded that phone call, that video call, and shared it with all of her backers. And you sort of see the inner workings of this relationship between creator, artist, right, and their fan base, right, kind of bridges the divide between, say, stage and audience. I found that really, really amazing. So then let's move a little bit further. Anybody familiar with this project, Pebble, right? So this is the third one. And so maybe you know the ending of this story. This is a story, what I would say, of scale and opportunity, right? I think it's important to note with the three campaigns that Eric and the team at Pebble ran, is that the same story exists, which is about this humble beginnings, right? They simply were getting no's all across the valley, and they had in their heart this known future that they were fighting for, right? Around putting a connected device on our wrist. And nobody else believed in what they were producing as a product. And so they came to Kickstarter, and the goal was simple. All they wanted to do, again, humble beginnings, all they wanted to do was build a prototype, right? $15,000, $20,000, I think, was their original goal. Their first campaign blew the doors off of that goal. The second campaign, which we're looking at now, clearly blew the doors off of that goal, $20 million. So here we are now going from $35, extreme innocence, and kind of carrying that, what I would argue, innocence into projects that quite frankly don't look all that innocent, right? But I think it's important to note that all of these projects share a similarity and a familiarity, which is putting the decision in the hands of each of you for whether I, the person who has the idea and the sort of creative spirit, whether the thing that I'm making deserves to exist or not, right? I think that's really powerful stuff. So I want to go back to maybe a little bit more of an emotional, heartwarming story. Again, a project that taught me something about the power of what we had built, gave me a different lens into what we had built. And this is a project by the name of the Viper. And as you can possibly tell, these are super young dudes. They are high school and middle school students. And the thing that they're trying to build, this thing called the Viper, is sort of emblematic of the thing in the background. So there's a fuselage of a two-seater Cessna, and they wanted to convert that airplane into a flight simulator. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was in my teens, I was not thinking about building a flight simulator. Anybody else, right? I was like thinking about music and other things, and certainly not thinking that ambitiously. And so, they've raised more money than I've ever raised on my own platform. I think that's kind of amazing. 383 people, which arguably were probably friends and family, but strangers as well. And there's a story of one stranger that I think is deeply important to me, and I think, again, emblematic of what I would say is the nature and the heart of the world that we're living in, and I think the thing that I am hopeful for in terms of the future. And that story goes something like this. There was a woman who had backed the campaign. She was a mother, and she decided to share her motivation behind backing the campaign. Right? She didn't know these kids. She had nothing to do with them. I don't know where in the country she was, but she had nothing to do with these kids. And the story that she shared was that she hoped that one day somebody would see in her kids what she sees in these kids. Right? Effectively, the act of paying it forward. Right? But I think what was even more important, what it taught me, right, as a designer, as an entrepreneur, as a technologist, as a founder of this platform, which is arguably pigeonholed too often in economics and capital, the thing that she taught me, that she reflected back, was that the power of that capital that was moving back and forth, the dollar that she gave these 5 kids to build this crazy project, was really an expression of something more than the money that she gave. And that was an expression of courage, and actually something even more powerful than that, which is love. She has a love for her kids, and she wanted to kind of express the love for her kids into these 5 kids, right? So there's another part to this, which is what I wonder is 5 kids who had an ambitious goal, crazy little thing, to create a flight simulator and asked the public to do so, and was obviously acknowledged with being able to do that project. Where do they get to go in 10 years, 20 years? What do they get to build, right? Through the act of courage, right, putting themselves out there at such a young age, through the support of their family, through the support of teachers, and quite frankly, 383 people that believed in a kid's ability to create a flight simulator, where do they get to carry the future forward? So that's inspiring to me. All right, so that's enough about Kickstarter. I want to share another project that I'm working on. So I left Kickstarter at the end of 2013, kind of a crazy thing to do, I guess. Company's still going crazy, doing amazing things, but I felt there was more to do in the world, right? I felt there was more problems in what I would say is within the experience or journey of bringing a creative project to life. And so I spent a lot of time traveling, spent a lot of time hanging out in coffee shops and art studios and innovation centers, whatever you want to call it, just hanging out with people on the ground, getting a sense of like where their troubles were. Effectively, that is how we came to the birth of Kickstarter. And so I thought it was important to go back, what I would say is to creative culture. And the result of that is this reflection, I kind of spoke about it earlier, is the act of bringing a new project into being is similar to the story of Sisyphus. Anybody familiar with the story of Sisyphus? Forever, in infinitum, pushing a rock up the hill for that rock to fall down, to push it up again, to fall down, push it up, fall down. It is painful. It's a painful journey. So how do we make that journey a bit more friendly, a bit more achievable to get through that pain? We're never going to get rid of it entirely. I think that pain is somewhat valuable, but how do we get rid of parts of it? How do we make it easier for people to bring ideas to life? So Kickstarter was clearly part of that mechanism. And so I went on this little journey, what I would say is like, in reflection now, a series of experiments that I thought was going to turn into a business. And that was building a space, think of it like a maker space or a co-working space, a creative studio, just a raw industrial space. I live in Chicago, so it was in the middle of Chicago. And we started off with a little pop-up. Pop-up sounds like a prototype, right? So we started off with a prototype or a proof of concept just to see what would come out of it, experiment a little bit, right? And the intention here was to build a series of these spaces around the world, super awesome, cool future, more people making, getting access to advanced tools. And along the way, we saw some, next, cool. Let's go back. Technology is awesome when it works, cool. So, in the journey of that project, and what I would say the journey of discovering what would potentially be a company that was based in brick and mortar, we saw a lot of amazing things going on. So very similar to Kickstarter in the diversity of projects, from technology projects to art projects to civic art and technology projects to board games and video games and the like, to consumer product goods, like this whole array of amazing projects over the course of this year that we ran the second iteration. And the reality is, we're not building that company, right? And so the story that I want to tell through my own journey, and I'm in the moment of that journey right now, is a different lens of being humble, and that is realizing that you're trying to achieve this bigger goal, like this bigger mission, but the object that you might be using to achieve that goal may not be the object, right? You might need to scrap it and throw it away, pivot, as we talk about. And so we're in this stage where we're sort of hush-hush and stealth, but we're now building a software platform, right, to effectively enable more people to go through and go from idea into production for products and art and design. And so that's all I'll talk about that. That's stealth, kind of hush-hush, if you will. Maybe you'll see a little bit more about that, I hope, in the future. But I think the important piece to take away from all of this, right, is just to start, right? There's so many obstacles kind of up against us. Sometimes the biggest obstacle is ourselves. So how do we get over ourselves just to start, right? Just to get over that little hump. Share the project with somebody and get over that hump. So last I want to leave with what I would say is maybe a reflection of this moment that we're in, right? And I think the thing that fascinates me, at least my little lens of the world through the lens of Charles and his little like punk rock birth, is we're in this great state of change, like the state of Delta, right? A lot of things are changing. Like, how do we get here? We now get here from our phone to a lift to come in the door. We don't hail a cab anymore, right? And that feels fairly binary, but I think the future that I'm far more interested in is this one that is arguably a hybridization of the past, right? And what I mean by that is this art or is this technology, right? I don't know, right? But the reality is it probably turns into something that's similar. And the beginnings of any project look probably more like an art project. Undefinable, misunderstood, nobody gets it, this isn't going to work, right? Until you find your audience, and then they get it. And then all of those naysayers come around. So I think what's interesting is the start of any project is the beginnings of some future. Another story I like to tell is a cyclist. We saw that earlier. An avid cyclist. There's a small company out of the UK called Rafa. Anybody know Rafa or a cyclist? Awesome, cool. And so what I love about Rafa is they're kind of they started out online, right, direct to consumer, and now they have retail. Like we see this all over the place, like with Warby Parker and Casper and the like. And they started experimenting with, well, what is the value of enabling our audience of avid cyclists, right, to just touch the clothing? Not cheap clothing, right? So to just touch the clothing, and then build a community around the business. And so what they've done now is they've got locations all around the world. This happens to be the one in Chicago. They've got one in San Francisco, down by the water. And what I find really fascinating about these stores is they actually want you to do the thing that the traditional retailers don't want you to do, and that's this word loiter, right? And so there's this little bench in the back, right? And that's where I co-work. I hang out here because I'm a cyclist. I love hanging around other cyclists, kind of a nerd that way. And you usually commonly see me at least a couple times a week hanging out, working on my computer, coding or designing over here. So I get to loiter, and I get to do this other thing in there, which you don't see in traditional retail, which is have a cup of coffee. And so this is somewhere between a co-working space, a community space, a fashion boutique, and a coffee shop. And I find that quite fascinating. All right, moving on. Like clearly, this is not a hotel, like WTF, right? What an amazing place to stay, right? It's Airbnb, clearly, right? And so there's this, again, this hybridization of, like, they're a hotel-ish, kinda, sorta, but they don't own a single property, right? And so again, like, how do we think about how the world starts to blur? This is fascinating to me as a kid who studied mechanical engineering in college. dropped out to become a designer, and then stumbled into this thing called entrepreneurship. So I argue I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And so there's a 3D printer, clearly. I think everybody probably recognizes that. And my question here then is this a factory? Is this a lab? Is this an office? Like, there's a dude in a sport coat. Like, what does he have anything to do with engineering, right? Not the aesthetics of engineering. And so again, it's this like weird, mushy, blurring the lines of what that future might look like. And what the future of manufacturing might look like, what the future of product development might look like. And we're just at the early beginnings of people experimenting with what this might look like. Another story. Future of funding, right? So I guess we get back into Kickstarter. So one of Ultimaker's competitors actually was funded on Kickstarter. This arguably came out of, I believe, the MIT Media Lab. I know it came out of MIT. And so there's this sort of connection from academia into the public eye and allowing the public to see a project that is incredibly experimental at the time and funding that future, right? Participating in defining the future, right? I find that interesting. So again, kind of blurring the lines in terms of traditional finance. This is super gross, but what's amazing about this is that is one's esophagus. This is the future of medical practice. And what I mean by that is there's a game developer who built an app that you can download in the App Store that surgeons use to simulate, going back to the Viper, simulate surgery. And this blows the doors off of any surgical simulation software that was out there, because they took an approach that was far more like a video game, like World of Warcraft or so forth, and applied it into the surgery world. So fascinating, right? The world's changing, coming at industries from unknown places. So anybody know Smile Direct Club? I gave a talk a couple weeks ago to a room full of a couple thousand dentists, and they freaked out. So I love the reaction that something like this can have on people. So Smile Direct Club, like Casper, direct-to-consumer, orthodontistry. You don't talk to an orthodontist. You go to a WeWork to go work with somebody from the company to fit and scan your mouth. And then in the mail, a couple weeks later, comes this piece of orthodontia. And so the experience of what I would say medicine, the future of how we engage with our bodies, we start to take a little bit more ownership over that, becomes really interesting. And so where does the relationship with the orthodontist or the doctor play? We could probably look at other industries like the travel industry as a reference for what that future might look like. So I want to go back to this kind of antagonistic, like punk rock statement, and I am gracefully, I think, moving into my 40s. So I'm slower and pudgier and softer, and in this world of change, this like massive kind of shift driven by, I suppose, at some level, technology. There's a lot of consternation about the change that we're in, right? Some of it come from incumbents, some of it comes from us as people in society, and this narrative of the fact that the rules were always meant to be broken, like we should challenge those rules. Rules feel scary, right? May not feel appropriate for everybody, but there's this other realization in this moment of like great turmoil and great change, right? This state of constant beta that we're in is a different way to look at this change, which I think is more empowering, certainly more empowering to me. And I think it goes back to the sort of opening remarks, which is just a soft little edit, is that the rules that we were kind of living under in the past were always temporary anyway. If you go back in history, you see the rules are constantly broken, but they were broken over the course of decades or millennia. They're just now getting broken every, 6 hours. Like the moment we walk out of here, somebody's going to launch an app and it's going to change the world. And so I think with that comes this great capacity for us to realize that everything that we've created, Kickstarter included, is at some level a social experiment. We don't know that it's going to work, right? You're kind of running this invisible race with competitors that you don't even realize, right? And you just hope that the construct of what you've created touches somebody and that they can use it and find success in what they're doing, right? And I would argue Twitter and Facebook all started out in this sort of innocent way with great ambition. And so I think in this statement, there's this beauty which is hopefully empowering to each of us to just try, to just start, to put yourself out there, put an idea out there, like Kickstarter campaign or otherwise, just put an idea out there and follow that dream for yourself. And so with that, I'd like to end. Thank you guys very much. And awesome. Thank you.